cute, adorable, talented, well-behaved. Those are the words one could use to describe the little girl dubbed the Child Beauty Queen of the United States in the 1990s, JonBenét Patricia Ramsey, born August 6, 1990. However, people often say beauty comes with a price, and that saying proved true for JonBenét when, at the tender age of 6, she was mysteriously murdered. The case surrounding JonBenét's death remains one of the biggest, most baffling mysteries not only in the United States but also worldwide, garnering the attention of numerous experts and investigators. JonBenét was born with a heavenly gift of beauty surpassing her peers, along with remarkable intelligence and wit. She had fair skin, shiny blonde hair, big round blue eyes, and an incredibly radiant, angelic smile. At just a few years old, she became a prominent figure by participating in a series of beauty pageants for children, winning titles such as Little Miss Colorado, Little Miss Charlevoix, and National Little Mississippi. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, herself was a former Miss West Virginia. JonBenét frequently appeared on fashion magazine covers and major newspapers for advertising campaigns. It seemed that a bright future awaited her, but a tragedy struck right after Christmas night in 1996. JonBenét was last seen at 10 p.m. on December 25, 1996, on the bunk bed in the spacious four-story house where her family lived. At 5:50 a.m. on December 26, John and Patsy Ramsey called the police to report their daughter missing. A ransom note demanding $118,000 for the safe return of their daughter was found on the kitchen counter. Strangely, the ransom amount matched the exact bonus John Ramsey received earlier that year. In reality, the Ramsey family could easily afford the $1 million ransom, but it may have been a diversion tactic to mislead the police into thinking there was a thorough investigation into the family by the perpetrator. The Ramsey family and the police collaborated to deliver the ransom money and apprehend the kidnappers, but there was no further activity. Later that afternoon, John unexpectedly discovered his daughter's body in the basement of their home, wrapped in a thin blanket, with a cord around her neck, her hands tied above her head, and her mouth taped shut. The autopsy results revealed that JonBenét died from strangulation and blunt force trauma to the skull. The darling little girl JonBenét was unexpectedly murdered, which truly shocked the American public and media. News of the murder quickly flooded across various newspapers. It was unimaginable that such a lovely girl would meet such a tragic end. The perpetrator must be a cold-blooded and terrifying individual. The police found DNA samples under JonBenét's fingernails and in her underwear, but no suspects in the FBI's database matched. Just 2 days later, on December 28, local newspapers reported that the Ramseys became the main suspects in the case. The police argued that there were no footprints in the snow around the house or snow tracks in front of the doors, including the windows. This indicated that someone inside the house was responsible for the girl's murder. Moreover, something strange happened in the dark basement. While others accompanying him saw nothing, John suddenly yelled, discovering his daughter's body. Additionally, a series of items from JonBenét's room were found to have been oddly moved. However, the evidence was insufficient to convict the Ramseys. In 2003, prosecutors concluded that the DNA found in JonBenét's underwear did not match any family members, thereby ruling out the Ramseys' involvement in the case. In the subsequent days, in their eagerness to find their daughter's killer, Patsy Ramsey even announced they were willing to offer $100,000 for any information leading to the arrest of the perpetrator. 10 years passed, and JonBenét's parents still desperately awaited the outcome of the investigation. On June 24, 2006, Patsy breathed her last breath at the age of 49 due to breast cancer. In August 2006, John Mark Carr, a 41-year-old American citizen and former teacher, confessed to being JonBenét's killer after being arrested in Thailand. He told Thai police that he loved the little girl. On the day of the incident, he visited JonBenét. They both went to the basement, where accidentally, he killed her. However, later, the police found that his DNA did not match the DNA left by the perpetrator at the crime scene. In fact, he admitted guilt only to gain attention and fame. Sometime later, Detective Ollie Gray, an investigator hired by the Ramsey family to investigate their daughter's death, asserted that the murderer was Michael Helgoth, a resident of the nearby area. Interestingly, Michael Helgoth died just 2 days after the murder. Investigators believe he was eliminated by his own accomplices in JonBenét's murder. Due to the inability to question the perpetrator and those involved, this suspicion also reached a dead end. Until September 2016, 2 decades after the incident, in the CBS documentary series named The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, investigators once again presented evidence and arguments affirming that this unfortunate girl was killed by her own older brother, Burke Ramsey, who was 9 years old at the time, and the subsequent events were covered up by their own parents. Investigators disclosed that Burke had previously lost his temper and struck his sister with a golf club, causing her to have a scar on her face, 1 year before the tragic event occurred. They also suggested that this was not a murder case but rather leaned towards the hypothesis of accidental death. James Kohler, the former head of the investigation team in Boulder, presented a scenario agreed upon by all other experts. "My hypothesis is that the Ramsey family returned home around 9 or 10 o'clock at night," Kohler said. JonBenét was asleep, and John carried her upstairs. Patsy stayed downstairs with Burke, giving him tea and pineapple. Then, Patsy went to wake JonBenét up to go to the bathroom. JonBenét woke up, possibly brushed her teeth or not. I think she woke up and felt hungry, so she went downstairs. At the same time, Patsy continued to pack for the Michigan trip. I think Burke might have been angry about his sister taking some pieces of his pineapple, and in his anger, he may have used a flashlight to hit her, accidentally causing her death due to severe trauma. This development aligns with the evidence at the crime scene as well as subsequent investigations. Investigators did not assert that Burke intentionally killed or participated in covering up the case, but they firmly believed that the Ramseys intentionally misled the police investigation. The Ramsey family didn't want this case to be solved. That's why it still exists as a mystery until now. Former FBI criminal behavior analyst Jim Clemente said. A key piece of evidence contributing to this argument is a 6-second audio recording from the 911 call. Using modern technology, investigators identified the voices of 3 people conversing. Mrs. Ramsey believed she had hung up after calling the police, so she casually discussed with 2 other individuals presumed to be her husband and son. In the recording, the father's voice said, "We're not talking to you," before the mother asked, "What did you do?" "Oh my God, help me." Burke's voice was heard asking, "What did you find?" even though both Ramsey parents had previously claimed that he was asleep at the time. The recipient of this call, Kim Archuleta, stated that she felt the call was prearranged. She spoke as if, "It's done, we called the police, now what?" and that caught my attention. So I kept the phone, trying to listen to the next sounds, as if there were 2 voices in the room, maybe 3. 3 different voices. Archuleta affirmed, "One of the reasons why I kept the phone until the connection was lost is that something would be revealed, and people need to know." Another crucial point worth noting is the 3-page ransom note, which was reanalyzed by legal language expert James Fitzgerald, who asserted clear signs of staging with deliberate errors. Fitzgerald analyzed inappropriate language usage given the context, deliberate mistakes, and affirmed that at that moment, he knew there was deception because just the first 3 sentences were enough to convince him that this truly wasn't from a kidnapper. During that time frame, other ransom notes were around 50 to 60 words long, or shorter, while the Ramsey note was 385 words, with content that could have been condensed into 3 sentences. Regarding this note, Fitzgerald stated it was like reading a Stephen King novel. Later, it was also determined that the note was written on paper torn from a notepad kept by Patsy Ramsey in the kitchen, with the handwriting resembling hers, although it couldn't been conclusively determined if she was the one who wrote the note. On September 12, 2019, Burke, then 29 years old, spoke out for the first time in 20 years of silence in an exclusive interview on Dr. Philosophy. For a long time, the media made our lives crazy. They followed us everywhere. For a child, it was truly a nightmare. So, I have resentment towards any kind of social media and became a private person. And why am I speaking out now? Because it's been 20 years, and there are still many people paying attention to it. Burke chuckled. On September 19, 2016, in the subsequent interview on Dr. Phil, Burke asserted that he had no involvement in his sister's death. Dr. Phil then mentioned the hypothesis that Burke's parents staged to protect their remaining child. "I don't know what to say because I know that's not what happened. Many people also say that a 9-year-old child couldn't do that." Burke replied, "I always thought the perpetrator was a pedophile who saw my sister in a beauty pageant and sneaked into our house." But Werner Spitz, a professor at Wayne State University specializing in forensic causes of death, commented that all arrows point to Burke. The boy himself caused the incident, possibly out of jealousy, psychological issues, or something else. I don't know why. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm sure the boy's parents altered the crime scene to cover up the truth. Meanwhile, Burke stated that although 20 years had passed since his sister's death, he still hopes that JonBenét's killer will be brought to justice. After this interview, Burke faced harsh criticism from the online community for his suspicious body language. Specifically, Burke kept laughing when discussing his sister's death. This behavior is entirely unacceptable for someone talking about the pain of losing a loved one. Whether Burke is the actual perpetrator in this case remains uncertain, but the hypotheses and arguments put forth by law enforcement are understandable. Burke might have succumbed to anger upon seeing his talented, beautiful, and beloved sister admired by others. For any child, uneven parental love can easily lead to jealousy, resentment, and even hatred. What might happen in such situations is difficult to imagine because children are not fully aware of their own behaviors. The Ramsey family's story should also be viewed as a lesson for parents in teaching and educating their children. Show children that they are loved and cherished just as much as their siblings, and let them see the boundless love parents have for them. Earlier in 2019, Western media revealed shocking information about the identity of the man who allegedly murdered JonBenét Ramsey. Accordingly, Gary Oliva, 54, who was serving a 10-year sentence for possession of images of child abuse, wrote a letter in a prison in Colorado, admitting his guilt more than 20 years ago. "I've never loved anyone as much as JonBenét Ramsey, and I let her slide, breaking her skull. I saw her die. It was an accident," Gary Oliva admitted in a letter. In another letter, Gary Oliva described the brilliant beauty of the young lady and admitted to the attacks and sexual abuse of many other children. These letters were sent to music publisher Michael Vale, who used to be Oliva's high school mate. According to Vale, Oliva's letters are enough evidence to conclude that Oliva was the one who killed the young lady more than 22 years ago. So far, the real perpetrator hasn't been revealed and the truth of this mysterious case has not been uncovered. Hundreds of suspects have been interviewed during that time, but sadly, none really have enough evidence to convict anyone. So, according to you, who is the killer? Let's leave a comment below.